Now coming to the section on cap tables. So what is really a cap table? A cap table in simple English is basically a listing of all the shareholders of a company and their ownership stake in the company. Your cap table is built from the time of inception over a series of transactions which impact ownership. So it could be your personal investment, raising, let's say, a friends and family round, across, let's say, a seed round, angel round, Series A, Series B, to probably where the company is at this point of time. So it's a series of transactions which go into creating a certain cap table today, which lists out as to which shareholder holds how many shares and how much stake in the company. When most companies which have raised external funding think about the cap table, there is some confusion which can come out about, because typically there'll be multiple classes of shares. So the best way to think about a cap table for a founder is on a fully diluted basis. So you may have equity shares, you may have convertible instruments like convertible preference shares, etc. But ultimately, all of that converts into a certain number of equity shares. So that is what is known as fully diluted basis, assuming all convertible securities convert, and let's say into the maximum number of shares possible. So you always drop your cap table on a fully diluted basis. That will bring everyone to the same base. And that will actually give you a sense of who holds how much stake in the company. Now, why is your cap table relevant, and what are the implications it has for founders, especially as they think about raising funds? Founders should be very careful of tracking their stake. As founders raise funding and as they sort of dilute, they may get to a point where their stake in the company gets fairly low, to the point where the next round of funding, the investors start questioning as to, do the founders have enough skin in the game? Or is this a company which is more owned by investors and the investors are calling the shots? So it's critical for the founders to understand what stake they hold in the company and to see that it doesn't slip below a certain threshold. Also, investors also want to understand how much of the company is actually owned by the employees, because it is critical for startup companies, especially intending to become world class and scale up and become fairly large, to have ownership spread with employees, because without building a great management team and without building a second, third, fourth line, it's impossible to really build a large unicorn sort of a company. So how much of the companies actually with employees under the ESOP pool is something investors will look for. If they find this to be inadequate, they may ask you to actually create or enhance your ESOP pool. And finally, looking at the cap table gives the investor, as they drop the term sheet, gives the investor the actual numbers and the class of securities which they need to issue, whether it's going to be a convertible preference share or it's going to be a convertible note, and the number of shares it will actually convert into. Those numbers get decided once the investors get a look at the cap table. So typically you need to share your cap table with prospective investors and maintain it and keep reporting it to your investors on a periodic basis. And finally, as part of the due diligence process itself, there will be a lot of focus on the cap table itself. You'll have law firms which come and check whether you're compliant with all the regulatory and compliance elements from an ownership perspective. This is fairly critical because ultimately the evidence of ownership for an investor is the number of shares, the class of shares they hold, and they would not want to ideally get that number wrong.
Revolutionize your startup's equity management with Qapita. Request a demo today.